And for Kansas State, their deep man here, Dylan Edwards, standing about his own 21. Here's the punt. And it's not a long one, but it takes an Arizona bounce. Then it's grabbed and taken. It's around the left-hand side. Looks to turn the corner at the 50, down the far near sideline to the 30, 25-20, 15-10-5. Touchdown, Kansas State. Dylan Edwards returns it. He's got that kind of speed. He needed a seam. He found it down the near sideline. Nobody could catch him.
He did.
Yeah, I'm going to echo Lamont there. That was not pretty in Manhattan, Kansas on Friday night. I will say this. It's always, and I've said this for years about evaluating football. It's never as bad when you go back and watch it the second time, I think, as it is the first time you're watching it. If you really get a chance to dive in and look to see what happened. And I know there's a lot of people that are very upset with this performance by the Arizona Wildcats. I've seen things from this was the team we thought was going to change the narrative about Arizona football. I've seen a lot of people obviously going in on Dino Babers and his offensive play calling. I'm not, again, and I guess that depends on what you really thought this team was going to be. And I'm not sure. You can certainly let us know. What did you think this team was going to be? Did you think it was going to be? If you thought it was going to be a 12-0 team, then obviously you're going to be upset. If you thought it was going to be a 10-win team, then you're probably going to be upset. I thought it was an 8-win team, and I saw the large list of those 8 wins coming on the backside of the schedule. I mean, I had them 3-3 out the gate. I didn't have them winning either of these 2 road games coming up to start their Big 12 lives at Kansas State or Utah. So, I mean, again, what did you think this team was going to be at the beginning? 520-848-1290, 520-848-1290. There were a number of top takeaways I had from this game. And it was interesting because Brent Brennan kind of got into one of them today that I was thinking about all weekend as I kind of was reviewing the play. And then I went back and watched the game last night after I got back from the Valley, went up and saw the Cardinals game yesterday. What a performance that was. We'll get to that as well. But one of the things that I kept coming back to as I was watching the game again last night and breaking it down was that this defense's eyes just they're not in the right place. They're not seeing it. They're not seeing it. And it goes back to something Rich Rod used to always say. As a defender, your eyes have to be right. Your eyes have to be right. And right now, this team, this defense, my top takeaway from this defense is their eyes are not right. And it was funny I was thinking along those lines because that's exactly what Brent Brennan said today in his press conference. He said, we've got to work on our eyes and what they're seeing, because you can see it in the linemen believing the ball's going to go inside when it's going outside. That's because your eyes are not right. You can see it in the defensive backfield, thinking a tight end is going to do one thing and then he does another. Is because your eyes are not right. This defense has to get their eyes right if they want to be able to compete, because good Lord, Central Florida and TCU, did you see that game over the weekend?
Mm-hmm.
That's what this is going to be, I think. That's what kind of what we thought it was going to be. We thought there were going to be some teams in this league that could put up points. So you got to be able to score to stay in this league this year, for sure. The other thing is that, again, I mean, and one injury one or two injuries really can swing the pendulum of a football team. We've seen it. I said from practice number 3. Really, I think I said it for practice number 1. that my major concern was this team was going to be the offensive line. This offensive line was not what we thought we were getting. I had a lot of concerns about that with injuries, with guys not being there. I mean, you lost a guy that was projected to be, by a lot of people, projected to be the next coming after Jordan Morgan, and maybe even better than that. And he wasn't there on day one. Then you lose Dalton Johnson. Then Trayton Stukes goes out of the game. And as much as we love the grit of a guy like Owen Goss coming from Colgate, a smart, heady ball player, man, that was the first time he'd ever been in a game like that. And they did exactly what NFL teams do every week. When somebody gets hurt, the next guy goes out on defense. What do? When that cornerback goes out and the backup cornerback comes in, what do? We're going to run a go route and see what he's all about. And that's exactly what they did to Owen Goss. They attacked him as soon as Stukes went out and went right down the field to take a 2-touchdown lead. And at that point, I mean, it was all over but the crying. And that's rough. That's rough. But again, you don't know. I mean, we can sit here and talk about how great players like Owen Goss look in practice, but until they actually get out there in the real, we don't know. We don't know. And Friday night was the real. Now, I'm sure he's a smart enough ball player. He'll bounce back. He'll understand what he did wrong. They'll correct that. But again, when you're playing without two of your best, what did we say? The strength of this team was the defensive backfield. And now you're playing without two of those guys? That's tough. That's tough. Going into Salt Lake City. Now, granted, they don't have Cam Rising, so you got to feel a little bit better about that situation than maybe you did 3 weeks ago when he threw, 5 touchdown passes in the first game of the season? But a lot of work to do on this bye week. A lot of work to do. 520-848-1290. Guys, your thoughts?
I think the main thing, like you were saying, again, the injuries in the defensive backfield are hurting, not just in regards to keeping the eyes in the right place, but also there's a lack of understanding communication on that back half. And that may be just a situation of certain guys know each other's tendencies better when you play a number of games side by side with one another. How many times do you think Trayton Stukes goes up to Gunnar Maldonado and he tells him, hey, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to give this guy about 15 yards. I'm going to carry him. I'm going to play underneath once he hits that 15 yards if he tries to go deep on us, and you play over the top of me. So that way we can bracket him. You don't have that opportunity to do that when you have to throw in a guy to fill out a body in the middle of a game like that. There's no communication of understanding this is how I play to try and get underneath a guy on a deep route so I can try to stop the back shoulder fade, and then you can go for the moonshot in case they try to really go over the shoulder on us. There's certain communications that you need to have with guys on the back half that just aren't there when you have to fill in a new guy on there. And the other issue for me, DK, my biggest concern right now is we've had to talk about this defensive line and the constant rotation and things like that. My concern is I don't know if this rotation is just to keep guys fresh. I think they're still trying to figure out who on this defensive line is the standout to put a stop to the other team's offense in the trench. That's the biggest thing right now for me. I haven't really seen a guy on the defensive line really stand out for the most part on the defensive line to this point, as much as they would like them to after 3 games in the season.
And there's a lot of new guys, a lot of new faces down there, guys that were not on this team last year. Obviously, really, Taitai Uiagalelei was there last year, played a lot. Sterling Lane is really playing a lot for the first time. He was mostly a backup of 2 or 3 last year, so he's getting his first look, and he made some mistakes down there. And again, they just aren't these defensive ends. And it's not just, those 2 guys. It's Trey Smith, too. It's Lance Kennelly from Stanford. It's some of these guys that are veteran. They're just not seeing it right now. JW, your thoughts?
I'm looking at the other side of the ball. Like, defense is all well and good, but that first drive, 7 points, not much after. And it's a balance thing. I mean, I'm sure you guys talked about this extensively on the postgame, but 42 passes for Noah, 19 rushes, that offense is predicated on that balance. And I think we've seen some big games salting away those leads in the fourth quarters when we've seen a lot of rushing from this team through the first 2 weeks. That game, it just seemed like they really couldn't get – you got to continually move those chains. So if you talk about my biggest takeaway from that game was the inconsistency at keeping drives together by that run-pass balance. And so obviously you get behind, especially 2 scores, you're going to see those numbers go up for Noah. You're going to pass to get yourself back in the game. Everybody understands that. But at a base level, when you're talking about 19 rushes, 42 passes, the balance there, and that's an offensive line thing, right? That's moving those guys out of the way and consistently getting positive yards on the ground game. That keeps those guys guessing. That keeps those guys wondering, as opposed to triple covering T-Mac and making sure Noah has a lot of hands in his face. So, yeah, I mean, I don't think that the defense had a poor showing per se. I think that clearly that highlight we aired, that 78-yard punt return was a real swing in that play. I think there were 2 semi-evenly matched teams. I think if they played 10 times, Arizona probably gets them 3 or 4 times. I don't think Arizona was, overmatched by any stretch. I just think finding that run-pass balance to keep the offense on the field and keep moving those chains is going to be key moving forward.
Man, they looked good early. That first drive,
Yeah.
That was nice. That was really nice, but not a whole lot. And the penalties again, I mean, heck, you had 9 penalties, 5 on one drive. I mean, at one point it was 1st and 30. You can't have that. I mean, and a lot of these holding calls, I think that's a little bit of a surprise, and then it wasn't just one guy. Jonah had a hold, Wendell had a hold, Rhino had a hold. I mean, you guys, it's all across the line right now. Those guys have to step it up and be better in those instances because, again, Jonah and Wendell are the veterans. Rhino's one of the younger guys, and you expect a little bit more from your veteran offensive lineman than what you got in that game on Friday night. All right, it's a bye week. We do know the start time now for next Saturday night, the 28th, in Salt Lake City. A hashtag, as my frat brother Roland Martin, if you ever watch his show on a digital show, as he likes to say, hashtag we tried to tell you, 7:15. 7:15. Y'all thought these games were going to be earlier. I tried to tell you they're not going to be earlier. Maybe later in the season we'll get some games, and especially if you're playing back east. But if you think these games out west are going to be much earlier at this time of year than we've had in the past, that's not happening.
Especially DK here, because you talked about downtown Saturday nights.
Yeah.
Still not going on because of weather. You talk about Bear Down Fridays.
Yeah.
Still, the reasoning is because of weather. So,
Yeah.
I mean, clearly, we heard what Avery Johnson mentioned that kickoff there at Kansas State in Manhattan was the latest game he had ever played at a 7 p.m. kick. And obviously, any longtime Arizona fan, even last year, there were some 8 and 9 p.m. kickoffs. And that's really just been trying to fill those time slots, right? Pac-12 After Dark was that. It was filling those time slots late. But now I think it's going to be all over. I think you're going to see
Somebody's got to play
some
the
5
ESPN
p.m.,
7:15 game, right?
Exactly.
Someone's got to play it. And when you get to the point now where we're at in college football, where the time zones do not dictate the conferences anymore. Again, the Big Ten is not a Midwest time zone. The Big 12 is not the Mountain time zone. There's no Pac-12 anymore, but that's not the West Coast.
Just
time
think
zone.
of North Carolina and the Bay Area.
Yeah, no, you got teams that are coming all the way from California, Oregon, Washington, coming to play at Penn State, playing at Michigan, playing at Clemson, and all these other conferences. They're going across the country. Yeah, of course those games aren't going to be any earlier. You got to fill out the whole time slot.
Yeah, exactly.